So after his arrest in Gethsemane, as you recall, Jesus was led first to the home of Annas. And Annas was the former high priest over Judaism, and Annas remained the real power and authority over Judaism, over the temple, over the priesthood. He was the one really controlling all the power in Judaism. It was all under his control. So the questioning by Annas was the first phase of the religious trial. Annas then sent Jesus to Caiaphas, his son-in-law, who was the high priest that year at that time. And nearly all of the religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, were gathered together at the palace of Caiaphas. Again, this is all at night, in secret. The Sanhedrin were gathered together at the palace of Caiaphas. The Sanhedrin were the highest authority within Judaism. They were like the Supreme Court that ruled over Judaism. And I say nearly all of the members of the Sanhedrin were gathered because Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus were both members of the Sanhedrin, and they were secret believers in Jesus Christ. So we don't know for sure if they attended the trial of Jesus at the home of Caiaphas or decided to just stay home that night. At the trial at the palace of Caiaphas, Caiaphas the high priest asked Jesus directly if he's the Christ, if he's the Son of God, to which Jesus answered, "It is as you said." And remember, in response to his answer, Caiaphas rent his garments. The high priest tore his clothes and declared Jesus guilty of blasphemy. And the entire Sanhedrin gave their sentence that Jesus is deserving of death because he's guilty of blasphemy, because he has said that he's the Christ, he's the Messiah, and he's the Son of God. But Jesus wasn't really guilty of blasphemy because he is the Christ and he is the Son of God. What he said was true. Jesus will be executed for the truth, for being who he is. They will kill him for being the Messiah and being the Son of God. When he is taken to the cross, the Romans will put a sign over his head stating his crime. What was his crime? He was the King of the Jews. That's his crime. And so the trial at the palace of Caiaphas, that's the second phase of the three-part religious trial. Now that brings us to chapter 27, verse 1. It says, "When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor." Now Luke's account of this tells us, as soon as it was day, this council convened. And this is the third phase and final phase of the religious trial, this gathering of the religious leaders as soon as it was day. At the very beginning of the day, the religious leaders, they reconvene as soon as it is day. This time they meet in the judgment hall, in the temple, the place where trials are supposed to be held. And remember, I said just a moment ago that trials must take place during the daytime. They must take place in the judgment hall, in the temple, and they must be open to the public. So what does the council do? They meet as soon as it was day to quickly condemn Jesus while most people are still at home asleep. So this third phase of the religious trial, it's just a formality. It's a facade. It's a veneer. It's for appearances, so that the trial has a semblance of being legal. Maybe the council does this to appease their conscience, to make themselves feel better about their lawless actions against Jesus this night. Again, Luke's account gives us more details in Luke chapter 22. It tells us this religious council, they reconvened at daybreak. They brought Jesus into the courtroom. They asked him 2 questions, and then they voted to condemn him. That was it. They didn't call witnesses. They didn't hear testimony. this again, it's just a facade. They brought him in, asked 2 questions, and then vote to condemn him. The first question they asked Jesus is, "Are you the Christ? Tell us." To which Jesus answered, this again is in Luke's gospel, "If I tell you, you will by no means believe." In other words, the religious leaders have already made up their minds to condemn Jesus, so it's useless to tell them if he's the Christ or not. They're not going to believe. They're not going to have a change of heart. They're not going to change their minds about Jesus, no matter what he says at this point. And there are some people that will never change their mind about Jesus, no matter what you tell them, no matter what you share with them, no matter what proof you show them, they're just never going to change their mind. The second question they asked Jesus is, "Are you the Son of God?" So first question, are you the Christ? Are you the Son of God? The title Son of God speaks of his deity. To the second question, Jesus answered, "You rightly say that I am." And the Greek is emphatic, meaning it's more like, "Yes, indeed, I am the Son of God." And so his answer to this question leaves no doubt to his identity. He's the Christ, he's the Messiah, and he's the Son of God. And then Luke's gospel again, Luke tells us the council said, "Well, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. We don't need to have a trial. We don't need to call witnesses to testify. He has confessed with his own mouth of blasphemy. He has declared that he's the Christ, the Son of God, so he's guilty. By his own words, he's guilty, case closed, and the Sanhedrin vote to condemn him to death." And that's it. That's the final trial as far as his religious trials go. And it's just a formality to give the appearance of being legal. And it's at that point, again, Luke's gospel gives us this detail. It tells us that the entire council, the entire Sanhedrin, all of those priests arose and they led Jesus away to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, as we see here in verse 2. But they all go, so they all show up early in the morning at the home or at the palace of Pontius Pilate.